So I am here today with Jenna Nord, creative artist, photographer. And Jenna, you've spent years capturing women at some of their most vulnerable and life-changing moments.
Mhm.
What I really want to hear from you as we start is how did you find that path? I mean, first into photography and then within the world of photography, why is it that you decided to focus on women and then more specifically in the moments of pregnancy, birth, nursing, and your newest offering of primal medicine?
Mm, that's such a great question. So it's super personal. Imagine that.
Imagine that.
Yeah. Photography was something that I got exposed to in middle school. I actually happened to be Neil and Jean Chappett's babysitter. And Neil and Jean are famous nationally, but super local for founding Rocky Mountain School of Photography. And I was able to bop into some of their summer intensives and just get a taste for photography and fell in love with it. I think most middle schoolers, you get a camera at some point and just are like, I'm a photographer, and you just love, snapping pictures of your cat and such. And then I ended up taking some classes at the Lifelong Learning Center and just sort of finding myself as this hobby photographer of plants and then my children. And so, how did this transpire? My very last birth. So, I have four children, and my very last birth was a cesarean. And my sister, who is an OB charge nurse in on labor and delivery, happened to be my nurse for my scheduled cesarean. And she asked me if I wanted some photos because nurses will often just have a point and shoot and just do some photos for the patients. And I said, hey, why not? And it was really seeing those images about a year postpartum, um, reminding myself of those images, having brought them in to my mind's eye and my body, and reflecting on how important they were to my healing journey because my birth stories, yes, I had healthy, beautiful children, and I also was healthy and alive. Yet for me, they were hard. They were a struggle. They were super emotional, and there was a lot of disappointment in the ways that I wanted my children to come earthside, and then they didn't come in that way. And so these images, they gave me a story for all of my children. They gave me vision into like my power, my surrender, just validating everything I felt in my body. And so then I had these visuals to really tell me, yes, this happened to you. You did this. You're alive. And I just couldn't imagine not moving forward with the hobby photography that I was doing, and not offering this to other women who really want to see their birth stories. So it was sort of an epiphany at like 2 a.m. while I was breastfeeding my daughter. And I just said, this is what I'm doing with my photography skills. I'm going to learn how to become an actual professional photographer, and I'm going to offer birth story photography. Yeah, so that was the beginning of this photography career for me.
So I want to ask you about primal medicine, but you just said something that we need to dive into first because you
Okay.
spoke about images helping you heal. Right? So
Mhm.
we're here in this summit to look at whole health, honoring all of ourselves. And as you well know, our central theme is that you can't hate yourself into health and happiness. So I wonder if you can talk about how imagery can support healing based on what you've
Mm.
seen.
Yeah, specifically to the birth, since we're kind of pausing here, before we shift to primal medicine. Whew, this feels really alive, which I appreciate it feeling this alive and potent still 14 years later. My youngest is 14. Um, but I had a lot of negative self-talk after each of my births, about how it didn't go as I had planned. And in some way, I failed. My body had failed. And just so much self-criticism of like, I didn't prepare properly, or maybe I should have been more in shape, or just flooding narratives of how I wasn't worthy, capable. And these images from my last daughter's birth, they just illuminated a different story back to me. Um, I was amongst a very sterile environment, right? Hooked up to machines, and there's surgery happening. And yet I could see like the warmth and the pink of my skin, and I could see the tears in my eyes and the joy of getting to hold her right away. Um, and I can be pulled right back to that moment, being on the table and feeling all the feelings of um, being scared, yet I could make myself safe, and being like unknowing, but what was my inner knowing. So it was this constant like juxtaposition. And the images were like proof of this. And they're like so tangible, and like I can taste them, and like me and her in those moments that showed me something very healing for me in all my stories, amongst all of the blue and the white and the sterile and the grief.
Do you look back on those images now? Like, how often do you remind yourself of that inner knowing and that capacity to make yourself feel safe?
Mm. To be completely honest, I was looking back at them more often, um, when I was closer to the experience. Um, and so then, since then, 14 years have passed, and I would say that I have found new anchors and like visual milestones to reflect back into like my intrinsic knowing, versus like going all the way back to birth. But knowing that that
Things,
was like the
yeah.
monumental like turning point for me, or like my journey taking off into my womanhood, on that path. So,
Okay, so now tell us, what is primal medicine? How
mm,
did you birth primal medicine? And just for all of you watching, I have had the pleasure of experiencing the primal medicine journey. If you want to see those images, I think almost every image on my website is taken by Jenna. And it was a truly magical experience. But I'd love for you to share how that vision, what percolated it, and how did it come to be? Because we know it really is a birthing process that created.
mhm. So this service experience has been developing and unfolding over the course of about 6 to 8 years. And it originally began with wanting to offer a postpartum session to moms to really honor that postpartum body, to reclaim and give love back to oneself after this huge transformational life event. And at the time, I was calling them sensual skin sessions. And some women would incorporate their babies, and some women would just come on their own. And that ended up being an offering that started to attract women, and it made sense, but it attracted women who were wanting it to be less about something sexy or for somebody else, but really for some type of transformational time in their lives that they were going through, even beyond postpartum. So women were coming and sharing stories of going through, you know, great lengths of self-love and therapy and all kinds of experiences to just like bring them back home to themselves. And also stories of liberation and empowerment if they my favorite story is a woman who is in the bodybuilding industry, and she did the session because she wasn't going to conform to industry standards, yet she was really, really, really powerful of how strong and capable her body is and how beautiful she is. Um, and that she wanted to be seen as beautiful with the stretch marks of having children and not having the breast implants. That's like typical of her industry. And she was just like, this is who I am, and I'm full and I'm valuable, I'm worthy and I'm gorgeous. And so that's what those were, that's what those images were for her. And a lot of those sessions, the first few months to years, ended up with a lot of tears, and there was a lot of pausing and debriefing and hugging and waiting and then like returning to the photography. And I realized that I just wanted to serve women in a deeper way, with some really expansive space holding, that more so than I was even doing. I felt like it was a disservice to have like hour and a half session with so much emotion on board, and then just kind of like, oh, thanks so much, and you'll get your photos in a couple
Here's your
weeks.
clothes. Have a nice day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I felt empty, and I couldn't imagine how maybe they were feeling. And so I thought, no, there's something more here. There's something more for me to do. And like my purpose is deeper and wider than this. And so primal medicine, bringing a complete onboarding process, um, understanding what a woman's working with, what stories and narratives she wants to touch on, bringing that into ceremonial space where we really sit down together. We have a heart connection. We go through a few activities that bring us into our senses and into our body. Um, and now that's just become this whole new beautiful empire of an offering to really bring in ceremony and slowing down and space holding for all the narratives that are like are wildly alive within her at this given moment in time, that then we want to take into the photography witnessing that's then paired like later in the session.
Talk to me about what you see unfold when you support someone in finding the pleasure of slowing down, right? So you talked about sensation, connecting with our own body, and you mentioned these words, just supporting somebody, holding them while they slow down. What do you witness when someone else is able to touch that space inside of themselves?
Hmm. What I witness is peace, ease, fullness, conviction, but a soft conviction. I really see these women go from like this state of possibly like conjuring a bit, kind of working, the gears are churning, and then shifting into just a fullness. You can just feel the fullness of like, it's like physically what I'm doing right now, where they're just coming into themselves. And then I feel like everything else starts to just drop away. And within the body, they just start to move with ease and pleasure because of the space that we've set up and supported to allow for that. And I wanted to answer that first, but then just double back to say it's not just there right at the very beginning. And it's easy to have things be on paper, right? The onboarding process. Um, I'm working on loving my body more. Okay. And then we can even talk. I'm working on loving my body more. And then what does it actually look like and feel like when the woman feels safe enough and respected and honored enough to then be invited through um, activities and experiences to show me what working on loving my body more looks like. And that's so much about slowing down, feeling in, taking this time for yourself, and starting to bring just pleasure into the body, like all the like even the littlest of spaces, saying like, how does it feel on your fingertips? Or right, like how does a seashell feel on your fingertips? Or when you move your womb space, like can you really feel the fullness of your hips and like the juiciness of your thighs, and all of this narration to bring forward a different narrative than maybe they started with.
Okay. So you talked about sensation. You
Mhm.
and I have had conversations about sensuality and the importance to women of sort of really embracing the sensual self. But sensual and sexual get collapsed so quickly in our society. When something that you and I've talked about in the past is that sensual is like being with
Mm.
the senses. And I'm curious, like to me, but the primal medicine experience did have such a sensual feel. Is that something that you learned just from doing the work, or was that something that you kind of brought into the space? Does that make sense? Like, did you observe it or did you direct it
I
in those
think it's
early years?
I think if I'm understanding your question, I think it's both. That through my own exploration and journey into sensuality, and classes that I was taking and things that I started to be, reading, people I'm following on social media that are into somatic healing and sensuality. So onboarding all of that,
Got it.
accumulated in what the ceremony is. And the ceremony is so individualized.
Mhm.
So no one ceremony looks the same. And even the activities within the ceremony are not always the same as well, because there is where that might be answering that question. The other piece of that is that I obviously have a framework, and I have an arc that I'm working with to try to hold this space and work the ceremony and co-creation. But the woman sitting in front of me, it truly really is a positive feedback loop of whatever she's giving me, then I'm using it to then give back to her. And so right there in the moment, I may have a download of where we might want to go next.
Okay.
Um, and so what type of activity or sensation activity might come up for us just right there in the moment, to explore because of what she's presented to me.
Okay. That
Mm,
makes so much sense.
yeah.
When you talked about the woman who worked in bodybuilding, you mentioned something about cultivating her own sense of strength.
Mm,
It's something that you'd mentioned to me in the past is like this idea that our body informs our capacities and that people can really, through a process like this, um, really develop a sense of reverence what their body is capable of.
Mhm.
Can you tell us about not just, I mean, definitely about the process of cultivating reverence, but also how you see people's lives shift when they carry that experience of reverence forward,
Mm.
whether that's part of your own story or a client's.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful question. And I have a beautiful reflection on that, which just basically involves talking us through that. I'm going to suggest
Mhm.
that more than one story can exist at one time. And you and I have also talked about that. And so, for instance, if I ask a woman, give some love to an area of your body that you might have some negative self-talk around. And like, what would that look like and feel like? So let's take the thighs, for example. Okay, I have some criticisms there about my thighs, but what can I do right now to give some love to that area and let myself know that I'm valuable, I'm worthy? Maybe that's like rubbing my thighs in a nice, soft, nourishing way. Maybe that's patting. Maybe that's moving. Maybe it's jumping, like using the muscles. Maybe it's dancing. It could be so many different things that's so particular to you. What feels good? What brings pleasure? And then within that, saying, give, like bringing language to that to be able to say, okay, maybe on one hand over here, I'm saying aesthetically, I don't like how my thighs look. I mean, maybe I wish I were a little more fit or a little more tone or something like that, right? Yes, and oh, it feels so good when I squat and when I dance. And I love to dance. So I can be so reverent and practice radical acceptance of my thighs because they allow me to do this thing I really love. Or I love to hike. And so my thighs actually help me to hike. So I'm so grateful for the strength of my thighs. Or my thighs help me carry my children. And that's really important to me to be that able bodied. And so, wow, like, look at me. I can really, like, I can really sink into this radical self acceptance. We might not always be in a space of love, but can we accept where we're at? Can we accept who we are, our body, and our stories, and bring the other narratives along with the ones that are maybe not serving us as well? So that's an example there.
What I hear in what you're saying, which I think is really beautiful, is that there's no wrong making in what's already there. Right? Like you and I know, I can't imagine anybody listening that doesn't know the extent to which we are inundated with messages that say that each and every part of us should look a very particular way. And I think sometimes it can be really disempowering, really invalidating to be told like, oh, you should love what is, you should accept what is, and it should just all be great. And it's like, well, what do I do with all of this other stuff, this hurt, this shame, the dislike, the criticism that I've sort of internalized from living, in this culture? And what you're saying is like you can like you can keep that for the moment, right?
Mhm.
We're not asking you to put it down while also turning your attention towards all of these other pieces and being with both, right? You even said yes and. There's
Yeah,
no
I really think it's important to never negate like what stories are just really present and alive. And like you said, letting them all exist is really what I will, encourage and invite. And I'll also just give an analogy where I'll say, let's just treat that voice over there like a toddler maybe having a temper tantrum. And yes, okay, I see you, I hear you, but I'm not going to give any more energy to it. Like, or even come sit here on my lap. Like bring that voice in close and then turn. Can we just turn towards the other stories that are also true?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. Uh,
Mhm.
you have some images to share with us that illustrate some of this, don't you?
Yes, I have some images and then I brought up a testimonial um by a woman who was willing to write slightly on this topic, which is really great. We'll see if we have time for that. But I also have a poem that matches with these images that we're going to see right now from this primal medicine client. And I think it would be really potent to hear her words along with the images. And then I can do a little narration of what's happening within the photographs.
Excellent. I think you can share your screen now.
So this is Leia, and we do see a series here. I sort of wanted you to see these all together for just a second for a glimpse, um, but then bring this one forward. So with the mystery and also the magic here is that this image to you, Dawn, or anybody watching and listening, okay, interesting, curious. It's a woman in water. Looks like she's maybe splashing. But for her, there's layers of work that is being done here. And so within this space, now she's already moved through the oh, let's see how I feel. Like, am I up for this challenge today? She's like really in it. She's really in the radical self-acceptance and what stories are wildly alive in her. And so I invited her to physically work out a story she had shared with me in ceremony earlier that day. She doesn't need to tell me about it. She doesn't need to use any language for me. But I just said, how would that story look if you embodied it and then moved it? And this is what came of it. A lot of splashing, thrashing, pulling the fabric. And really at the end of the day, only herself, a little bit of myself, and the nature space really know what her story was about. And so it's just a really powerful image for her in particular in what story she was really wanting to relay at the moment, and then getting to receive this back as a validation of like, yes, that's how I was feeling internally. And do you have a question about it?
Oh, I was just saying, wow, it's so powerful to see. And just what you said, like, she didn't have to speak it. It wasn't about that. It's not about saying, oh, let me tell this story so that you get it. It makes sense. Like, what you're describing, what you're demonstrating is the power of like feeling it and then
Mhm.
moving it and really even showing how transformational it can be to be witnessed in something without needing the other person to get it.
Yes, absolutely. Mhm.
That's
It's
so
so powerful. So she sent me this poem she wrote after our session. And she said she feels very strongly that it reflects what I captured for her. She just as a little backstory, she is a army veteran and then a whole slew of magnificent other lovely things. So I will be. The war part is over for me. So I will be. Wild, messy, untamed, uprooted. I will move in an unhurried fashion, a prayer, a saunter, examined. I will love in an unrestricted manner, a deepening, a belonging, released. I will write in an unbridled affair, a path, a haven, collateral. I will cook in an unskilled form, a promise, a lesson, art. I will lead in an unapologetic cadence, a bearer, a messenger, acknowledged, uprooted, untamed, messy, wild, so I will be. The war part is over for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have chills all over. But to look at this image while hearing those words
Mhm.
is so profound. It's like I can see her untamed self
Mm.
right here, right? The wild, the messy,
Yeah.
the
And
fuller version.
it's really beautiful is when we dip into pleasure of the body. I think that we are also, if we're willing to sync up like the pleasure of our own stories, like what pleasure can we have from them, from sharing them, being witnessed in them, moving our bodies to them. Um, we're really just opening up to so much healing. And she's creating her own arc. I have an arc in mind, yet she's helping me co-create this experience here, to move through this piece of really big, demonstrative motions and heat, like core, heat and power and struggle, all the things that I would want to apply with my own language, but maybe sometimes there's not any language that can be applied. It's a feeling to then get to a space where the other image I wanted to share is this one, where she's just now completely like abandoned and into herself. Like nothing else exists outside of her power, like, and her showing up for herself and how she wants to be seen and how she feels that she truly is. And in reflection of seeing these images, she just started to cry and said, I'm going to swear. You can edit it out.
No.
She goes, Jenna, am I that fucking powerful? And I said, yes, yes, you are. And she said, I can see it now. And I'm like, like you're a army veteran. And now you're seeing it though, really seeing it. So that's her doing her own work. That's me providing a space of co-creation. That's an invitation to pleasure and somatic sensuality, but it's all there. And all of us, I feel like it's our birthright to have and share with one another.
So good. It's so powerful. So, okay, so I have a follow-up question about this. Thank you for sharing those. Like, I think what those images capture, um, it just brings an anchor to everything
Mm.
that you've been sharing with us. So
I love
thank you.
that word, Don.
Yeah.
You have given me that word. And so I've been using it, and it's, yeah, people really resonate with this
And
anchor. Mm.
Please thank Leah,
Mm.
all of us, because
Right.
it's so, I mean, you've asked me if you could share some of the images of what we've done together. And so far, I'm like, I have so much admiration for Leah's courage because I'm like, I mean, even though there are images that are on my site, right? There are other images that we captured in that process. And I'm like, they are for me at this
Yeah.
point in time.
Yes, for sure.
Um, and something that I want to ask you about that comes both out of things that you've shared, but also out of my own experience of working with you. It's like you talk about this arc, right? So there's the arc within the process. You have these questions that sort of help a person to figure out what is this for? What am I creating in my life? What am I contending with? What do I need to move through? But answering questions and then having an experience are different.
Mhm.
So, as I recall stepping into your studio, stepping into the ceremony, my memory is that in the beginning of the process, I was really aware of you and a camera.
Mm. Yeah.
And it took something for me to move through, like consciousness of person over here. What does this look like? Into my own space, my own presence, really my own power, and to let something emerge. Um, and then there's also what that supported in my life,
Mm.
right? Like to know, like I went through that, and then I have these images that show me a version of who I am that I
Mhm.
imagined that I could be, but now I can witness myself in being.
Yes.
And I'd say
Yeah.
it's largely why we're here today having this conversation is because of what that made available to me to see myself as someone who could do that, to see myself as someone who, could embody pleasure in deeper ways than I had given myself credit for having the capacity to do. So, what
Mhm.
I'm curious about as I bring those sort of three pieces into the conversation is what have you witnessed, right? So many of your clients you've worked with for years, whether it's multiple births or, the pregnancy, the birth, the raising of children, and now you're doing family photos, but then also women in these periods of transition. So I'm curious what you can share about what you see emerge in women, especially in areas of vitality and expression as they begin to take, I think the word that I'm looking for is ownership of themselves, right? Like we live in a society that almost says your body, your life, your being like is for others.
Mm.
And what your work does is say, oh no, my body is for me.
Mhm.
So what do you have the pleasure of witnessing as women do this work?
I've seen in the immediacy, what's not going to come to much of a surprise is a confidence because they did crack open and they did something super vulnerable and they lived through it. And then they're able to just revel in themselves. And so I really see at that reveal session with with the photos, they are like shocked in awe, and then like a delight settles in. Just this freedom, not a flippant freedom, but like oh yeah, this is me. This is who I am. This is of me and of my source whenever I want to tap into it. Kind of some similar along the lines of what you were speaking to. So that can be seen right away. And then I have been honored to receive some text messages and emails weeks and months after a session where I'll have clients just letting me know that they were really having a rough time, um, for whatever reason. life just was serving it up and they were not feeling their A game. And they went back to their images to remind themselves of that version of themselves that is also true and to really like let it be a resource to them, um, a counsel of sorts to get them through. And I think that's a really, really beautiful reflection of just like the tangibleness of having these images. And that does it does it change a woman um in a permanent way? Of course not. You know, we are here to continue to expand and um continue to change. That's just part of life, and we're all going to have these like dark moments and trials to go through, but this other experience has also shown them a truth about themselves, um, that they can hold on to. So that's really, really beautiful. um, and getting to see these clients as repeat clients, as you said, being a lot quicker to a yes, like having that just conviction and trust that they can really trust into their inner knowing of their decision making and taking risks, and also making some relationship changes or requests. That has also been a thing that has come with this type of witnessing, is bringing this power and empowerment back to a relationship. And that is, just to be fair, it's not always like a smooth integration
Oh no.
because the
I'm only laughing because I'm like, yeah, you should maybe put that in your disclosure statement. You know?
like
Yeah,
how
that is
to
an area of my life that changed dramatically after that. It's like what I would tolerate, what I would be quiet about versus vocalize, like different.
Mhm.
I didn't
Yes,
even fully make that connection, Jenna, until you just said that. And now
yes.
I'm like, oh, that marked a turning point. It was
Hmm.
dramatic.
Yeah, so that's, you're not alone in that, Don. That's pretty common. And then there's also the other story, the other narrative, which is women reflecting that they are feeling, even though the session wasn't about being sexy, they're feeling sexier, more alive, more willing to be seen, more, lights on or less clothing or whatever it may be, that they weren't there quite there before. But this, they just kind of turned that corner and they're just showing up like, oh, here I am.
Yes.
Here I am.
And like,
So,
what is more life affirming than that, right? Like, just to sort of really concrete it. I know right now we're like weaving my world and your world. What I find is that when a woman is in touch with her own aliveness,
mhm,
she can metabolize anything.
mhm,
It's like there's a different way of moving through life that is powerful, energized, resilient. Like that is health,
mhm,
it is strength. And you said something earlier, like way back in the beginning of our conversation. I don't remember the exact word you used, but it was something around the lines of like there's like a sense of conviction, but it's soft.
mhm.
Like it's what I'm hearing and what you're saying is like maybe some of that like kind of masculine hard driving, like go, go, go. It's about my to-do list and achievement shifts into a more feminine way of being that is equally powerful
Equally.
and yet wildly different in its tone and vibration.
Yeah, I really appreciate you noticing that and circling back, because in my mind, I really consciously wanted to say it's soft because these women aren't they're not, you know, wielding a staff and trying to prove anything. It's as if they're just settling in with ease and conviction. There's just like no more proving to the outside world. It's all like within here.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. It's so strong without being forceful. It's like all,
Totally,
all
totally. And
that.
it actually it brings me back to another thing you said early on. I'm thinking about the bodybuilder. Um, we talked really briefly about the difference between conventional beauty
Mhm.
and knowing yourself as beautiful.
Mm. Mhm. Yeah.
And what does it do for someone to know themselves as beautiful, regardless of how they measure up to the arbitrary standard of beauty in our culture? Can you talk
Mhm.
about that?
Well, this is huge. And I love that there's a possibility that you ask, multiple people um, this question and their angle on it. But for me, in my work with these women in particular, it becomes less about the physicality and the aesthetics, and it's drawn back to loving the story, loving your voice, valuing it, knowing it's worthy. Um, and so it really is a slowing down and a pulling back and dipping into those stories that make us wildly alive that we can love, appreciate, practice radical self-acceptance around, and then like that's exuding out from us. And I think that when we're just claiming ourselves and our wholeness, we are more attractive. We are beautiful. And so it's so much less about like what we're actually seeing in the mirrors for as far as like, oh, my hair is this color and my eyes and my shoulders like this.
Yeah.
I have forgiven, shown up for, sat with, loved, witnessed my internal self. And she is everything. She is magnificent. She is magical. And I'm going to then lead my life from that point forward.
Jen, I've never shared this with you. I don't think. I'm going to include this picture in our show notes. You took a picture of me it's straight profile. I think I'm holding a pomegranate and and just like this. I've had a contentious relationship with my nose for as long as I can remember.
Okay.
And when I was actually considering, I've told one person this, and now here I am saying it in a recorded platform. I was considering a nose job,
Oh, okay.
and I saw the picture that you took, and I realized I might get teary-eyed saying this. It is a reflection of my heritage.
Hmm.
Like it is literally who I am.
Yeah.
And it just changed so much for me to embrace. I feel like I made peace with generations
Mm,
by
yes.
looking at that picture and seeing the beauty of Persian culture reflected in me. I mean, and then the perfection of the pomegranate because it's so Persian. But there was just something that I was like, why would I ever disconnect myself from my own history. And I didn't have access to that before looking at those pictures.
I love this story so much. And I am so proud of you. I'm very proud of the work that you've done, and you were able to sit with that and you were able to see. You were able to see beyond. You went into the story and you loved it from there. So, like, that's giving me goosebumps. Yeah.
Really, yeah. Thank you for that. We've covered a lot of ground and it's been wonderful. So I'll offer you the floor one more time as you think about the importance of pleasure, cultivating vitality, and the central theme that you just cannot hate yourself into health and happiness. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you think needs to be included in this conversation?
So much. Oh my gosh. You know, so much has been said. I love the invitation to add something here at the end. And I really don't have something fresh and new, just circling back to that. I really do feel and believe, and I've seen that, like, dipping into pleasure, it can heal shame, it can rewire trauma, it can bring new, more supportive narratives, right, to our lives. And that we really have to sit with the stories of this wild alive inside of us, these stories, and to work there and love those stories first before we can, like, really do all the other things with our health. So yeah,
And I
I feel
thank you.
complete.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your gifts and Leah's story and so much inspiration. I'm really grateful.
Thank you so much for having me.